There are stories that sound like they belong in ancient scripture or in some distant corner of the world where miracles still dare to walk among ordinary people. But this one did not happen centuries ago, and it didn't happen in a far-off country. It happened right here in the United States on a cold, windy night over the Mississippi River, on a steel giant of a bridge outside Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where tens of thousands of cars and 18-wheelers thunder across every single day. And on that bridge, a 62-year-old priest was lifted off the ground by three men, dragged to the railing, and thrown 70 meters down into the black, swirling water below. Everyone who heard the story later said the same thing. He's gone. No one survives that fall, not into the Mississippi, not at night, but at the very moment his body sliced into the freezing current, something happened in the darkness. Something not one doctor, not one police officer, not a single witness has ever been able to explain. And people began to whisper the impossible. Did the Virgin Mary were truly descend into the river to save him? The man at the center of this miracle is Father Michael Harris, a quiet, wiry, silver-haired priest who has spent more than 3 decades serving a small, struggling parish on the east side of Baton Rouge. His parish sits between an aging trailer park, a shuttered factory, and a neighborhood of families who juggle 2 to 3 jobs just to make rent. He knows every face, every sorrow, every late-night knock on the rectory door. On that night, just minutes before he was attacked, Father Michael wasn't heading to a meeting or a dinner. He wasn't even returning home from Mass. He was driving his old Toyota Camry across the bridge to bring the last rites to a dying man. It was 10:37 p.m. Wind slashed across the steel beams. Semi-trucks shook the bridge with every passing roar. The Mississippi below churned like a black, heaving lung, cold, angry, unforgiving. Father Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale in the glow of the dashboard. He whispered a prayer for the man he was going to anoint. Jack Turner, a construction worker who had spent a lifetime running away from faith, and who now lay in an ICU bed on the edge of death. The Camry climbed the highest point of the bridge. That's when Father Michael saw it. A black pickup truck, parked illegally at the shoulder, engine off, lights off, windows tinted. Too dark, too still, too familiar. He had seen that truck before, at the edge of the church parking lot, idling outside the trailer park chapel, moving slowly behind him one night as he walked back to the rectory. A chill ran down his spine. He slowed. The truck's door cracked open. A man stepped out, a broad-shouldered figure, hood pulled low, the faint yellow glow of a street lamp catching the pale, jagged scar running across his eyebrow. Father Michael's pulse kicked. It was him, the same man who stood at the back of St. Jude Parish the morning after the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe was smashed to pieces. The same man who stared at him through the entire homily. The same man whose smile was colder than the river below. Another figure stepped out. Then another. 3 of them. They didn't shout. They didn't hesitate. They spread out like wolves closing in. Father Michael didn't have time to reach for his phone. The men were at his door. One ripped it open. Another grabbed him by the jacket. The scarred man leaned close, breath heavy with alcohol and rage. You should have kept your mouth shut about her, Father. And before Father Michael could speak, before he could say even one word, the men dragged him toward the rail. Wind tore across his face. The roaring river rose beneath him like a living thing. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He whispered only one sentence. A sentence the scarred man would later say he can't forget. Our Lady will not abandon you. And the scarred man snarled, "Let's see about that." Then they lifted him, and they threw him over. 2 days before Father Michael's body plunged into the Mississippi, the story began somewhere far humbler, inside a run-down trailer park on the outskirts of Baton Rouge. The place wasn't pretty. Rows of faded mobile homes, rusted pickup trucks, kids playing soccer with a beat-up ball, mothers washing laundry in plastic tubs behind their trailers. Life here was honest, exhausting, and always one missed paycheck away from disaster. Right in the middle of the park stood a tiny makeshift chapel, a converted storage shed with peeling white paint, and a tin roof that rattled whenever trucks sped by on the highway. Locals called it La Casita de la Virgen, the Little House of the Virgin, It was barely bigger than a living room, but for the immigrant families who lived there, it was the heart of the community. Inside the chapel, on a simple wooden table, stood the statue they all cherished, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Not expensive, not ornate, just a 60-centimeter plaster statue bought with coins, tips, and grocery store wages, collected over 6 long months. The children called her Madrecita. The grandmothers crossed themselves every time they walked past. And the men, tough, sunburned, calloused from working roofs and construction sites, would bow their heads before her every Sunday. But on that cold gray dawn 2 days before the attack, Abuela Rosa, a tiny, stubborn, 70-year-old woman with silver braids tucked behind her ears, unlocked the chapel door and froze. She didn't scream at first. It was the kind of silence that comes when the heart breaks faster than the mind can react. The statue was destroyed. The face of the Virgin was smashed. The bright green mantle was slashed with black spray paint. Shards of plaster lay across the floor like bone fragments. And the wall behind the table was vandalized with crude, hateful words in thick black letters. Fake queen. Idol. Don't worship her. Then the scream came. It rang across the trailer park like a siren. Doors flew open. Mothers came running barefoot. Children clung to their sleep-warm blankets. Men rushed over in work boots and pajamas. And when they saw the damage, something inside them collapsed. This wasn't just a broken statue. This was a wound. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, bent down and picked up a piece of the statue's veil. She held it the way someone might hold the hand of a dying grandmother. Her lips trembled. Mama, who did this to Madrecita? No one could answer. And then Father Michael arrived. He had been called at dawn. He came in jeans and a hoodie, breath still fogged from the morning cold. When he stepped inside the chapel, the whole room shifted. People moved aside, not because he was a priest, but because there was grief on his face too. A grief that mirrored their own. He knelt, not dramatically, not ceremonially, just a man kneeling among ruins. He picked up the broken face of the Virgin, cracked right through the eyes, and everything inside him stung. The old tin roof rattled in the wind. Someone sobbed quietly. A young father punched the wall, muttering in Spanish, "They went too far this time." But Father Michael didn't speak. He closed his eyes as if trying to breathe without letting the pain shatter him. He didn't feel anger. He felt something deeper, something he later described as the sorrow of a son watching someone hurt his mother. And it was that sorrow, that quiet, burning love, that would lead him, the very next day, to preach the homily that sealed his fate. Sunday morning arrived heavy and tense, as if the cold gray clouds hanging over Baton Rouge were mirroring the sorrow sitting in everyone's chest. Word about the vandalized statue had spread far beyond the trailer park. By the time the bells of St. Jude Parish rang for the 10 a.m. Mass, the pews were already filling with faces: American, Latino, Vietnamese, Black, working class, young families, elderly couples, exhausted night shift workers, all carrying the same unspoken ache. Father Michael stepped out from the sacristy with his usual calm, but something in the way he gripped his homily notes told the altar servers this morning wasn't like the others. The choir began the opening hymn, but the atmosphere was different, heavier, quieter, as though every voice was holding back tears. When Father Michael reached the ambo, his eyes first drifted across the front pews. Abuela Rosa sat there, hands clasped over a worn rosary, lips trembling. Near her, a young mother held her toddler close. A teenage boy who usually slouched during Mass sat bolt upright, jaw clenched. These were the people who prayed with a statue bought $1 at a time. Then Father Michael saw something else. At the very back of the church, near the doors, stood 3 men he had never seen before. Not praying, not singing, not kneeling, just watching. One man, tall, broad-chested, wearing a black leather jacket, stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Another, a skinny, nervous man in a baseball cap, kept scanning the pews, eyes restless. And the third was unmistakable, a scar running across his eyebrow, sharp and pale even from a distance. A cold smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Father Michael felt his stomach tighten for the briefest moment, but then he looked back at Abuela Rosa, and something hardened inside him. A decision, a line crossed. He placed his homily notes on the lectern, and then he slid them aside. The paper made a soft, scratching sound against the wood, a tiny sound that felt like a thunderclap in the silence. The entire church froze. Father Michael took a breath. When he spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the building with the weight of someone speaking from a wound still open. Brothers and sisters, I cannot preach what I prepared today. A rustle ran through the pews, because this week, our mother, Our Lady of Guadalupe, was not just insulted. She was shattered. Several women lowered their heads, wiping tears. A man in work boots tightened his grip on his baseball cap. Children stopped fidgeting. The air felt thick. Father Michael continued, for the poor, for those who work 3 jobs, for the widowed, for the immigrant, for the forgotten. Mary is not decoration. She is not a symbol. She is the one they run to when there is nowhere else to go. His voice cracked, just slightly but enough for everyone to feel it. And when someone breaks her image, they are not attacking a statue. They are testing whether we still have the courage to love her. The room trembled with emotion. Several parishioners sobbed openly. A father pulled his son close. A woman whispered, Gracias, Padre. But in the back of the church, the scarred man smiled wider. Not a kind smile, not even a mocking one. It was the smile of someone who had just found the target he'd been searching for. The choir members shifted uneasily. A few people exchanged glances. And though Father Michael continued preaching, with conviction, with tenderness, with the boldness of a son defending his mother, he knew deep down. Something had just been set in motion. Something dangerous, something irreversible, and the men in the back were already making plans. In the hours after that Sunday Mass, something unsettling settled over St. Jude Parish. A kind of heavy quiet that didn't feel peaceful, but watchful, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Father Michael felt it first. It wasn't fear. It was the sense that something had begun moving in the shadows. The first warning. Early Monday morning, while the sun was still climbing out of the fog, Linda Perez, a longtime parishioner, hurried across the church parking lot searching for Father Michael. She worked the night shift at a nearby gas station, one of those places where the fluorescent lights hum and trouble drifts through at 2 a.m. Her face was pale. Father, I saw them last night, she whispered. 3 men. They parked that same black pickup by the lot. I recognized the one with the scar. Father Michael's heart dipped. What were they doing? Linda swallowed. They weren't buying gas. They weren't passing through. They were watching the church. And I heard one of them say, that priest talks too much. She shivered as if saying the words out loud gave them power. Father Michael thanked her, blessed her, and walked back into the rectory in silence. The second warning. It came that same night. Father Michael was finishing some paperwork when he heard a soft thud at the front door. Quick, deliberate. When he opened it, a cold gust swept in, carrying the faint smell of river water. A single sheet of paper lay on the step. Thick black marker. 7 words. Stop talking about her. Last warning. No name. No signature. Just dread. Father Michael closed the door slowly. The house felt smaller. The silence thicker. He walked straight to the small table where a temporary image of Our Lady of Guadalupe had been placed in place of the destroyed statue. He slid the paper beneath the frame and lit a candle, the flame trembling violently as though even the fire was anxious. Mother, he murmured, if I must be silent, show me. But if I must keep speaking, give me strength. The candle steadied. The third warning. But the clearest message came the next night. It was close to midnight. The neighborhood outside was quiet. No cars, no dogs barking, just the hum of distant highway traffic. Father Michael stood by the window, preparing to close the blinds when he froze. 4 dark silhouettes stood just beyond the fence, still, silent, not hiding, showing themselves. A man's voice carried deliberately through the cold Louisiana air. Let's see how long this priest keeps running his mouth. Soft laughter followed. Sharp, cruel. Father Michael stepped back from the window. Not out of fear. He'd walked into hospital rooms, stood with the dying, comforted the broken. But this was different. This wasn't suffering he had been called to heal. This was evil that had come looking for him. He didn't call the police. He didn't call for help. He knelt on the hardwood floor of the rectory, his fingers wrapped around the rosary, beads clicking softly, breath steady, heart anchored. The only defense he chose was prayer, because deep down he knew the storm had already begun. And soon it would break over the bridge. The next day, Tuesday, dragged on with a strange heaviness. Father Michael spent the morning visiting homebound parishioners, blessing a newborn at the hospital, and helping an elderly couple pay their utility bill. Outwardly, everything looked normal. Inwardly, something gnawed at him. Every time a truck rumbled past, every time the rectory floor creaked, every time he caught a flicker of movement near the windows, he wondered if the scarred man was close. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a bruised shade of purple. Louisiana storms had a way of gathering without warning, like anger held too long. Father Michael was just finishing evening prayers when the rectory phone rang. Not the cell phone, not the parish office line, the emergency line. He picked up immediately. "Father?" The voice on the other end was shaking. "It's me, Emily Turner." Emily lived across the river, in a cramped apartment complex south of Port Allen. She was the wife of Jack Turner, the construction worker with a reputation for hard drinking, a short fuse, and a lifelong disdain for anything related to faith. "Emily, what's wrong?" "It's Jack." Her breath hitched. He's in the ICU. Liver failure. The doctors say he might not make it through the night." Father Michael closed his eyes. He had visited Jack before, once, months earlier, only to be waved off with a slurred, "Save your holy oil, Padre." Emily's voice cracked. "Father," before he passed out, he said if he had one last chance, he wanted you to come. A beat. "He said your name, Father. He's asking for you." That stopped him cold. Jack Turner, the man who mocked the church for decades, calling Mary a Mexican statue and accusing priests of peddling superstition, was suddenly begging for a priest? Something deeper was moving here. Emily sniffed hard. "Please, he's scared. I've never heard him like this." Father Michael stood slowly, gripping the edge of the desk. He knew what this meant. To reach the hospital on Emily's side of the river, he had to cross the Mississippi River Bridge. The same bridge where the scarred man's black pickup had been seen twice. The same bridge where shadows seemed to stretch a little too long these past few days. A trap. It could easily be a trap. But then he heard his own voice ask a question he already knew the answer to. Is Jack conscious? Barely. He keeps saying he doesn't want to die without making things right. Something stirred deep within Father Michael's chest. A priest's instinct. Something older and stronger than fear. A soul was calling. A man was dying. He could not ignore that. He gathered his oil stock, his stole, the ritual book, and a small wooden crucifix polished by years of handling. Before leaving the rectory, he paused in front of the temporary image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. A faint gust brushed against the window. Soft, gentle, almost like a hand on his shoulder. "Mother," he whispered, "if I must go into danger, then go before me." When he stepped outside, the air tasted of rain. The sky rumbled. Far off, lightning flashed behind the outline of the bridge. He started the engine of his old Toyota Camry. The dashboard lights flickered. The wipers creaked once, and as Father Michael pulled out of the parking lot, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was already waiting for him on the other side of the river. The hospital was nearly silent when Father Michael arrived. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of machines. Night shift nurses moved quietly through the halls, their sneakers whispering across the tile. Storm clouds pressed against the windows, dark and heavy, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Emily met him at the ICU entrance. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged. "Father, thank you for coming," she murmured. "He's fading in and out, but he keeps asking for you." Father Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "Let's go to him." They stepped into ICU room 14. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines blinked dim blue lights. An oxygen pump hissed softly. And there on the bed lay Jack Turner, a man who once carried cement bags on his shoulder like they were pillows, now reduced to a fragile, yellow-skinned shell. His cheeks were sunken, his lips cracked, his breathing shallow and uneven. Every rise of his chest looked like a small battle he wasn't sure he would win. Emily leaned close. "Jack, Father Michael is here." At first, nothing happened. Then Jack's eyelids twitched. His fingers trembled. Slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. They were different. Not the angry, dismissive eyes Father Michael remembered. These were terrified and humble and begging. "Father," Jack rasped, each word scraping out of his throat like broken glass. I'm scared." Father Michael sat beside him, his voice steady. "You're not alone, Jack. God is here, and so is his mercy." Jack swallowed hard, staring past the priest, toward the dim corner of the room, as if something was still there. "She was here," he whispered. Father Michael leaned forward. "Who was here?" Jack's chin quivered. His chest rose, fell, rose again. "The woman," he breathed, "before they brought me in. I thought I was dying. I couldn't breathe. Everything went dark. And then," he coughed, grimaced, "I saw a woman standing right there." He pointed weakly to the end of the bed. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Jack continued, voice shaking like a child's. "She wore this long blue cloak and a pink dress underneath, like those pictures, the ones in the Mexican markets. And she had this glow around her, not bright, just warm. Like she knew me." Tears slid from the corners of his eyes. "She looked right at me, Father, but she wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed." His voice cracked. "She looked sad, sad for me, like she felt every awful thing I ever did." Father Michael felt the air shift in the room. "What did she say, Jack?" He closed his eyes, remembering. "She said, 'Don't be afraid. Come back, my son.' And then she touched my arm. Right here." He lifted a trembling hand to the spot just above his wrist. "And I could breathe again." Silence filled the room. Thick, holy, electric. Emily sobbed quietly. Father Michael bowed his head. It was unmistakable. Undeniable. Our Lady of Guadalupe had visited Jack Turner. A man who mocked her, a man who mocked God, a man who had run from mercy his whole life, and she found him at the edge of death. Father Michael picked up the oil stock and gently anointed Jack's forehead, praying the words of the church with a steadiness that surprised even him. Jack wept, not from pain, but from something breaking open inside, something old and hard finally giving way. When the prayer ended, Jack whispered, "Father, if she came for me, does that mean I still have a chance?" Father Michael squeezed his hand. "Jack, her coming was your chance. Take it." And for the first time in decades, Jack Turner closed his eyes, not in fear, but in peace. When Father Michael stepped back into the parking lot after leaving the ICU, the night had changed. The air was colder, heavier. Storm clouds stacked over the Mississippi like dark, tumbling mountains. Thunder grumbled somewhere far upriver, echoing between the steel beams of the great bridge. He tightened his coat, took one last look at the hospital's glowing windows, and whispered, "Stay with him, Mother. He needs you more than ever." The old Toyota Camry coughed to life. Rain began as a mist, then thickened into erratic drops that tapped against the windshield like impatient fingers. The highway leading to the bridge was nearly empty, only the occasional semi-truck rumbling past, its tires hissing on wet asphalt. Streetlights flickered in the wind. A billboard advertising a casino on the Louisiana coast groaned as a gust slammed into it. Father Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. He tried to shake off the unease creeping up his spine, but it clung like a shadow. Jack's story, the warnings, the men outside the rectory, the black pickup. Everything felt as though it was converging. By the time he reached the foot of the bridge, Rain was falling in sheets. The river below churned, its dark surface broken by streaks of lightning reflecting like silver veins. He turned on the wipers, old, squeaky things that protested with every pass. As the Camry climbed the long incline, Father Michael whispered a quiet Hail Mary, Holy Mary, Mother of God. Halfway up the bridge, the traffic thinned to nothing, just his headlights cutting through the rain, just the low hum of tires on steel. And then he saw it. His heart stopped. A black pickup truck, parked illegally on the shoulder, engine off, lights off, just like the first time. Father Michael's pulse hammered. No, not tonight. Not after Jack. Not after everything. He eased his foot off the gas, letting the car slow to a crawl. Lightning flashed. Three silhouettes stood beside the truck. The tallest one stepped forward just enough for the streetlight to reveal the pale, jagged scar across his eyebrow. The scarred man. Again. Watching him. Waiting. Rain hammered the windshield as Father Michael passed them. For a few seconds, he thought, hoped, they might stay where they were. Maybe they'd wait. Maybe they'd let him go. Maybe tonight was not. The pickup's headlights blazed on. The engine roared like a beast waking up. Then the truck launched forward. Father Michael's stomach dropped. He slammed his foot on the gas. The Camry lurched, the tires spitting water as they struggled for traction on the slick steel surface of the bridge. The pickup closed in behind him, headlights burning white into his rearview mirror. The wind howled, thunder cracked. The Mississippi churned below like a waiting mouth. The pickup gained speed. Closer, closer. Father Michael felt the vibration of its engine through his seat. Mother Mary, he whispered, whatever happens, I'm yours. Suddenly the pickup swerved left, then right, then left again, cutting across the bridge lanes like a predator circling prey. The scarred man lowered his window. Rain blasted into the cab. His voice rose through the storm. You should have kept quiet, Father. The truck surged forward. The collision didn't happen yet, not yet. But Father Michael knew. This was the beginning of the ambush. The bridge had become a battlefield, and the night was far from over. The pickup lunged forward again, skidding slightly on the rain-slick steel. Its engine roared over the sound of thunder, drowning out the desperate hum of Father Michael's old Toyota Camry. He gripped the wheel hard, trying to keep his car steady as the bridge trembled beneath him. Stay with me. Stay with me. He breathed, as if the Camry could hear him. But the truck was closing in. Fast. A violent jolt slammed into the rear bumper. The Camry fishtailed, sliding toward the guardrail before Father Michael wrestled it back into the lane. The windshield fogged with panic and cold. His wipers screamed across the glass. Another hit, harder this time. The Camry jerked sideways, tires screeching. Through the rearview mirror, he saw the scarred man leaning partially out the window, rain whipping his face, his expression a twisted mixture of fury and triumph. Pull over, Father, he shouted through the storm. Let's finish this. Father Michael didn't answer. He couldn't. He focused on keeping the car straight, keeping himself alive for just a few more seconds. But the men weren't waiting. The pickup accelerated again, this time swerving sharply and ramming the Camry's left side. Metal shrieked. The Camry lurched violently, smashing against the guardrail. Sparks flew in a spray of orange light as steel scraped steel. Father Michael slammed on the brakes, but the wet road betrayed him. The Camry skidded, half spinning, until it came to a stop angled dangerously toward the edge. And then everything went still. For a split second there was only breath, thunder in the distance, rain pounding the hood, the hiss of the engine, then headlights, blinding, white, approaching fast. The pickup barreled straight toward him. Father Michael barely had time to react before the truck screeched to a stop inches from his front bumper. Doors flew open. 3 men spilled out into the storm. They didn't run. They stalked. The scarred man led the way, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes burning with something darker than anger. This could have been easy, he growled, but you had to preach. You had to stir people up. You had to talk about her. Father Michael opened the car door slowly. He didn't attempt to flee, didn't raise a hand. I spoke the truth, he said softly, voice steady despite the wind. And the truth is that Our Lady, a fist collided with his jaw, snapping his head sideways. "Shut up," one of the men barked. "No more talking." Rough hands grabbed him, one on each arm, dragging him out into the rain. His feet slipped on the slick steel. The storm swallowed his breath. The scarred man stepped closer. He grabbed Father Michael by the collar, pulling him so close their foreheads nearly touched. "You think she's going to save you?" he snarled. "Tonight? Out here?" Lightning split the sky behind him, framing the scene in a flash of blinding white. Father Michael's voice trembled, not with fear, but conviction. "She won't abandon you either." The scarred man froze for half a heartbeat. Just half. Then rage twisted his face. "Let's see if she can find you at the bottom of the river." Two men lifted Father Michael by the arms, feet dangling above the deck. The guardrail loomed behind him, only a thin strip of steel between life and the raging Mississippi. "No, wait!" He wasn't pleading. He was trying to bless them. He barely got the first words out. "May God forgive." They hoisted him up. Rain blurred everything. Lightning cracked. Wind howled. And the scarred man gave the final command. "Drop him." They did. And Father Michael Harris, 62 years old, servant of the poor, defender of the mother he loved, fell backwards into the black, thundering void. The moment Father Michael's feet left the steel of the bridge, time seemed to come apart. The roar of the storm vanished. The shouting of the men disappeared. Even the hum of the highway above dissolved into nothing. There was only wind, cold, slicing wind rushing past his ears as his body dropped, faster, faster, through the black air. The bridge lights stretched into thin, glowing lines overhead. Rain hit his skin like needles. The Mississippi loomed beneath him like a living mouth, opening wider with every passing second. He didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. His mind was strangely clear, as though everything he had ever been, everything he had ever done, was being played through a narrow corridor of memory. He remembered the day of his ordination, the trembling in his knees when the bishop laid hands on him, the overwhelming sense of belonging when the congregation sang, "Here I am, Lord." He remembered his mother's funeral, the way he knelt beside her coffin and whispered that he would try to love people the way she did. He remembered the hundreds of faces in the trailer park, children clinging to cheap backpacks, mothers praying for husbands who never returned home, men exhausted from 14-hour shifts thanking him simply for listening. He remembered the destroyed statue, the shattered face of the Virgin, the tears of Abuela Rosa, the silent rage in the eyes of the little girl holding a broken piece of the cloak. He remembered the scarred man and the smile he wore when Father Michael spoke up for Mary. Not proudly, not defiantly, but simply as a son defending his mother. He remembered Jack Turner, gasping for air, trembling, whispering that a woman in a blue cloak had come to him. He remembered Jack's question, "Do I still have a chance?" And then, impact. The world exploded. The water hit like a wall of concrete, slamming into his back, crushing the air from his lungs. His spine jolted. His limbs splayed. Darkness swallowed him whole as he plunged beneath the surface. The Mississippi closed around him, thick, cold, suffocating. A river with weight, with memory, with secrets. He sank fast, 5 feet, 10 feet, 20, down into the freezing, violent dark. The current snatched him, spinning his body like a leaf. Mud filled the water around him, thick clouds of silt rising from the riverbed. His lungs screamed. His chest burned. Panic scraped at the edges of his consciousness. He tried to swim. His arms barely moved. He tried to kick. His legs felt like iron. He opened his mouth once, just once, and brackish water flooded in, choking him, biting into his throat like ice. He couldn't tell which way was up anymore. There was no surface, no light, no sound. Only the river pressing in, squeezing tighter, colder, harder, as though trying to claim him for good. His heart slowed. A numbness crawled through his limbs. The pressure in his chest became unbearable. And in that moment between life and whatever comes after, his thoughts did not turn to fear or anger or the men who threw him. They turned to her, "Mother, into your hands." The words weren't spoken. They were breathed inside his soul. His eyes, barely open, caught only black. Total, endless black. And then, a flicker, a shimmer, a soft, impossible glow blooming in the depths, like the first hint of dawn filtering through miles of water. It grew brighter, closer, warmer. Something was coming toward him. Someone. The glow expanded, slow at first like a lantern being uncovered, then widening into a soft blue radiance that pushed back the darkness in gentle waves. The Mississippi River, moments ago a choking tomb, began to still. The current eased. The mud settled. Even the cold seemed to loosen its grip. Father Michael hung suspended in the water, barely conscious, sinking deeper. But something in him stirred. A part of his soul recognized that light long before his mind could. The glow condensed, took shape, softened. And then she was there, not swimming, not drifting, simply present, as though light itself had chosen a form. Her cloak shimmered like blue silk touched by moonlight. Her dress glowed a gentle rose, moving without the water moving it. Her veil drifted around her face like mist. And her face, oh, her face. It was not the face on statues or prayer cards. It wasn't carved or painted. It was alive with compassion so deep it hurt to look at it. Eyes that carried both oceans and tears. A smile both sorrowful and tender. Love so fierce it made the river seem powerless. Our Lady of Guadalupe stood before him, beneath the river, in the heart of the storm, just as real as any living woman. She reached out her hand. Her lips never moved, but her voice filled him, not in his ears, but everywhere within him, as though his own soul echoed her words. "My son, do not be afraid." The freezing pain in his chest broke like shattered glass. Warmth radiated from her palm, spreading through his ribs, his lungs, his throat. The burning vanished. The tightness dissolved. Where there had been water, there was breath. Actual breath. He inhaled, deep and full, not through his nose or mouth, but as though the water itself had become oxygen. What is happening? The thought barely formed in his mind, yet she answered it. You are not dying. I am with you. Her hand moved to the center of his chest, right against his heart. A soft glow pulsed beneath her palm. Each pulse sent warmth flooding through him. Strength, life, peace. With the next pulse, the river around him brightened. With the next, his limbs regained feeling. With the next, his heartbeat steadied. With the next, he felt weightless, like a child carried in loving arms. Her voice again. I lift you up, my son. Slowly, gently, his body began to rise. Not from kicking, not from the current, but as if unseen hands were carrying him upward through the water. The river parted around them, moving aside like silk brushing past a lantern. The impossible light swelled around her, illuminating even the mud at the bottom of the Mississippi, as though it were glass. As he ascended, he felt tears leave his eyes. But instead of dispersing into the water, they glowed like tiny pearls. She continued to lift him, inch by inch, toward the surface that still seemed impossibly far above. The water brightened. The pressure eased. The world softened. And as he neared the surface, her final words drifted through him like a command wrapped in love. Tell them, do not be silent. Someone needs to hear. Then, the water above him split in a burst of shimmering blue-white light, and Father Michael rose toward the world of air and storm once more, carried by the mother who had refused to let him die. The surface of the Mississippi split open with a soft whoosh, as though something gentle, not violent, was rising through it. Rain hammered the river. Wind clawed at the water. Thunder cracked above the bridge like God himself was pounding the sky. And yet, for a few seconds, the storm bent around a single point on the water. A faint blue glow shimmered upward, swirling beneath the choppy waves like moonlight trapped in a whirlpool. Then the glow intensified, bright enough to illuminate the undersides of the bridge beams, bright enough to make the raindrops look like silver sparks. Not lightning, not headlights, something else. A small fishing boat, an aging aluminum John boat with a dented outboard motor, was puttering upriver at that exact moment. On board were Frank Malone, a retired tugboat captain with 50 years of river salt in his veins, and his grandson Ethan, a lanky 15-year-old with a baseball cap turned backward. Ethan pointed, voice cracking. "Grandpa, look! That light! What is that?" Frank squinted past the rain. His weathered hands tightened on the tiller. "Storm doesn't make light like that," he muttered. "Not in my lifetime." The glow swelled, and then, in the center of the river, a human form broke the surface. Ethan gasped. "Someone's out there!" Frank's training kicked in instantly. He cut the engine. "Grab the life ring! Now!" Ethan scrambled to the bow, nearly slipping on the wet deck. By the time he looked again, the figure had drifted closer, face up, arms floating outward, as though someone had laid the body gently on the water instead of it rising from the depths. But what froze them both was the faint, fading outline of a glowing handprint on the man's chest. "Grandpa," Ethan whispered, "is that real?" Frank didn't answer, because he didn't know. He only knew one thing. The man wasn't dead. They reached him within seconds. Ethan tossed the life ring, but the current barely tugged the body. It was as though the river hesitated to swallow him again. Frank leaned over the edge, hands steady. "I've got him. Help me pull." Together, they heaved the soaked, limp priest into the boat. His collar was torn. His face was bruised. Water streamed from his clothes. But something about him felt wrong. Not wrong. Unexplainable. Frank pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. A beat, a weak one, but steady. "He's breathing," Frank said, startled. "Lord have mercy. How? A fall from that bridge. He should be—" Ethan swallowed. "Grandpa, look." The glow was almost gone now, just a whisper fading beneath the priest's sternum. But the outline remained, a child-sized handprint, soft blue like someone had placed a tiny palm directly over his heart. The boy whispered, voice trembling, Is that Mary?" Frank didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. Instead, he cranked the engine to full throttle. The boat sped toward shore, slicing through rain and waves. As they approached the dock, bystanders, sheltering from the storm, ran toward them. Someone screamed, "Call 911!" Another shouted, "Is that Father Michael?" Phones came out, flashlights swung. In the middle of the chaos, Ethan knelt beside the priest and whispered, "Mister, whoever saved you didn't let you die tonight." Frank looked at the boy. "No," he said quietly. "No, she didn't." St. Vincent's Hospital was buzzing by the time the ambulance arrived. Nurses rushed toward the gurney, eyes widening when they saw Father Michael's condition. His soaked clothes, the bruises across his ribs, his torn collar, the way his chest rose and fell in steady but impossibly clean breaths. "Possible drowning victim," a paramedic shouted. "But his lungs are clear, completely clear. We don't know how." Clear lungs after falling from a bridge. Into a raging river, after nearly 10 minutes underwater. Impossible, unexplainable, and yet real. Doctors swarmed, machines beeped, IV lines were set, but every test only deepened the mystery. No water in the lungs, no cardiac arrest, no brain swelling, only 3 fractured ribs and bruising along the jaw and shoulders, as though someone had braced him during the fall. By sunrise, word had spread. The receptionist, the night shift security guard, an EMT on break, a cafeteria worker who'd overheard staff gossip. Everyone was whispering, the priest who fell from the bridge lived. There was light on the water. The old tugboat man swears he saw a handprint glowing on his chest. People say it was the Virgin. By noon, Father Michael finally regained consciousness. His first breath was slow and deep, like someone waking from a deep, healing dream. He blinked against the hospital lights. A nurse gasped softly, "You're awake. Father, you made it." He touched his chest instinctively and felt warmth. Not heat, not pain. Warmth. Right where her hand had been. Before he could speak, a soft knock sounded at the door. The nurse turned. Her expression shifted from surprise to alarm. A man stood in the doorway, broad-shouldered, drenched jacket, eyes red and swollen. It was the second man from the attack, the one without the scar, the one who had held Father Michael's left arm while they lifted him over the guardrail. His hands were trembling as he clutched a crumpled baseball cap like a lifeline. A security guard stood behind him, ready. But the man lifted both hands in surrender. I'm, I'm not here to hurt him, he stammered. Please, I just, I just need to talk to the priest. The nurse hesitated. Father Michael spoke softly. Let him in. The man stepped forward, legs shaking so badly he nearly stumbled. The moment he reached the bedside, he collapsed to his knees. His voice cracked open like something breaking inside. Father, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought you were dead. God help me. I watched you fall. I saw you go over. Tears streamed down his face. I haven't slept. I keep seeing it. And then last night, he wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. I saw the light on the water. I saw something lift you up. He swallowed hard. I don't know what I believe. I never prayed. I never cared. But I know what I saw. And I know, he choked on the words. She didn't let you die. Silence filled the room. Not empty silence. Holy silence. Father Michael reached out with his uninjured hand. He touched the man's shoulder gently. My son, if God's mercy reached you on that bridge, don't run from it now. The man broke, silent sobs shaking him like a child. Is there any hope for someone like me? He whispered. Father Michael smiled, tender and tired, the way a father smiles at a prodigal. There is more hope for you now than ever. The man bowed his head. The first prayer of his life slipped from his lips. And in the hallway, a nurse wiped her eyes, whispering, It wasn't just the priest who was saved last night, was it? Dear friends, if you have stayed with this story until this moment, your heart has surely felt the same trembling that touched the people of Baton Rouge on the night Father Michael was lifted from the Mississippi. A trembling not of fear, but of awe. Because in a world filled with storms, violence, and shadows, heaven still bends close to those who call upon it. What happened under that bridge was not only a rescue, it was a reminder that Our Lady does not wait on the shore. She walks into the darkest waters to find us, to lift us, to bring us home. If this story moved you, if you believe miracles still happen, if you believe that no soul is too lost for God's mercy, I invite you to leave a prayer in the comments for anyone who is struggling tonight. Anyone standing on their own bridge, looking into their own darkness. Your prayer may be the hand that lifts them. And please share this video so more hearts may be touched, more lives may be consoled, and more people may discover that heaven still fights for us. Finally, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to accompany Touched by Grace on our mission to bring the miracles, the hope, and the tenderness of Our Lady into every home. May the Virgin Mary watch over you and your family, today, tomorrow, and forever. We'll meet again in the next miracle story of Touched by Grace.